And so the way that I view it is kind of like your subconscious mind is like a film projector, and then the film that you put in the subconscious mind they're your beliefs and assumptions and stories about yourself, about the world around you. And then your 3D reality, which is, yeah, like I said, the reality you live in, is basically a big movie screen. And all of those beliefs and assumptions are just playing out with different characters and different scenes and different situations and circumstances that have to prove that film true and have to like show you those stories.
Well, hi there, and welcome to a Sit With Me podcast. My name is Solène, and I am your host. And today, for the last time this year, for the last time in 2024, we're sitting down with a beautiful, beautiful guest. I wanted to end on a positive, empowering note, and this is where we're going to talk about manifestation and how to manifest the life of your dream, how to manifest a better life, but also love in your specific person. We are sitting down with my favorite manifestation content creator on TikTok, hands down, and it is Coach Kayla, Love Coach Kayla. She talks about manifesting your specific person, manifesting love, but she also talks about her journey on how she manifested weight loss. And so I sent her a DM and she said yes, and I could not be more happy, more thrilled to have her on the podcast. And we talk about all things manifestation. What is manifestation? What is this woo-woo delulu crazy thing that is actually not that crazy that everyone is talking about? She shares her knowledge, her story, just like she does on TikTok, authentically, openly, and honestly. And that's what I love most about her. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story, sharing your knowledge so openly. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But also, it is the last episode of the year. Thank you to every single person who listened to me rambling to this podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who wrote me, who liked, who shared, who commented. Who I saw on Spotify that people put like 5 stars and people rated the podcast. Thank you so much. It means the world. And next year we're coming back stronger and better with even more guests, with better conversations. And I'm so excited for you to see what we have in store for next year. If you want to share your story, this is a platform for it. If you want to see a guest, if you want you to be a guest on the podcast, please feel free to write me at sitwithmepodcast@gmail.com. I will be delighted to read you because this is what it is. It's about taking a sit with me. And yes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Coach Kayla, for accepting to sit down with me, for your knowledge, for your authenticity, for your energy. And for the last time in 2024, please take a seat with Coach Kayla. So again, thank you so much for accepting. Like I was just saying, I love your content to a point of like every single time I listen to every single one of your video. When you come on my For You page, I stop and I listen, and I do my best to understand it as best as I can and to practice it in my daily life. And I call you Coach Kayla. Like it's just that's how I'll call you, just like Coach Kayla all the time. In mine it's like Coach Kayla, Coach Kayla, Coach Kayla. And where are you right now? Because I know that it's really early. I'm so sorry that it's so early for you.
Oh no, it's not too early actually. It's we're in Arizona here, so we live over in the west coast of the US. But yeah, it's only like 10 in the morning here, so it's a comfortable early morning.
It's
But
it's a
thank you
smooth ride.
Yes, I loved when you reached out to me. Like I was telling you earlier, I just like loved your energy, and I loved how like genuine you could just feel this like glowing energy you have, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to you. You just have such sweet
Thank you. You were
energy.
part of my dream list because at first I did all these episodes by myself because I was scared of inviting people. But then I was like, okay, enough talking by myself. I need to get people to get people on the podcast. That's why it is called A Seat With Me, so that people can take a seat with me. And I had like this list of all my dream people, of my dream like topic and my dream guest, and you were one of them. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna shoot my shot. She had like thousands and thousands of followers. So I'm just gonna send a DM and see what happens. And when you said
Oh,
yes, I was like, this is so great. So yeah, it means a
I'm
lot.
so glad you did. Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes. So just so for people who don't know, I call you Coach Kayla. You are Coach Kayla to me. And you are not just a hypnotherapist, but you're also a love coach, a
Yes.
manifestation coach, and you do content mostly on TikTok on how to manifest SP and just manifest, I guess, a better life, right? It's more than
Yes.
just your SP. and your content revolve around that. We're gonna revolve around that, and we're gonna dig into that a little bit later. So today I want to talk about your work, but also your story, but because I feel like it is so inspiring, and just I think like just talking about your story is the best way to talk about manifestation, because you did it and you succeeded at it, and it's just the best way to talk about it. But before we talk about the manifestation part, I'm curious, what can you talk to us about what was your life before before manifestation? Like paint us
Yeah.
a picture.
Yes, it was not great. It was honestly a lot of it was just a lot of sadness. Like I wasn't in a good place, and I was over 100 pounds overweight, and so my body hurt all the time. I had a lot of health issues like eczema on my hands. I also had like really bad acne that was painful. I remember my body hurt a lot. And then on top of that, I just felt like really lonely. Like I was totally broke, like no money, just couldn't find a job. Like I just remember I always tell people this, but I remember every New Year's Eve, I would cry and I'd just be like, oh, it's another year that went by and I'm still like my life sucks. And that's pretty much what it was like before. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching the law of assumption, because I've just done a 180 in everyone in my life. Like my dad always tells me, he's like, I just can't believe I've watched you like turn every area of life around. And so that's why I'm so passionate about sharing it with other people, because I'm like, trust me, if I could do it from where I was, like you can do it too, I promise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I feel the most when people bring their testimony. I feel like that's the best part of it, when it works for you. And what got you into manifestation?
So in 2012, I had an initial awakening where I learned about the law of attraction, and I got it to an extent, but I kind of just thought it was affirmations, and if it was meant to be, it was meant to be. I didn't understand the depths of it and how your subconscious mind worked and everything. But what really got me into it was I had just started trying to lose weight, and I remember a video came up about how your subconscious mind creates your reality and how your beliefs about yourself basically shape your reality. And I was like, oh, so my body is my reality. And I was like, so what beliefs do I have about my body? And it was like, it kind of initiated with that. And I was like, what beliefs must I have had to get myself to where I am now? Just feeling like having all these health issues, really overweight and stuff. And that's really what got me into it, was like weight loss, and then also a specific person. Because at the same time I had met Mike and I wanted to manifest him. And I remember like both of those things combined I did at the same time. I lost the weight and manifested him at the same time.
Yeah. So you have but at first, didn't that sound crazy? Like, did you accept it right away? Because I know that for some people, it's like you hear all of that. Of course, you will see the thing about change your mindset, change your life, and your subconscious, etc., etc. But so many people are like, that's bullshit. That's not possible. Did you immediately believe it, or were you like, meh, whatever?
I actually did. So I always go off of my feelings because I just felt it as true in my body. And I think if I had just come across this without having that initial awakening like 10 years prior, I think that I maybe would have been more skeptical. But I remember even when I learned about the law of attraction in 2012, I just like felt it in my soul as true. Like I remember getting chills and I'm like, this is true. And I remember again when I learned about it in 2000, I think it was 21, when I was losing weight and also learned about specific person, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And I just kind of like, I've always been very open-minded, so I was like, well, I need to know more about it. I've never been one to like blindly follow. I wasn't just like, okay, well, all this is true now. Like, but I did think like, okay, there's truth to this. Like, I can feel it. And so I did watch a bunch of more content about it, and I was like, wow, okay. And anytime a question popped up, I would look up a video on it, and I was like, wow, that makes sense. And so I guess the more I researched, the more it just made sense. And I was like, wow. And I would apply it to different areas too. And I think I saw it reflected back. So that also helped me with the buy-in that it was true, I think too. But I
Can you
know what
talk
you mean.
about your awakening? What happened there?
In 2012, I remember I kind of just thought, I was like, I don't know, something's missing in my life. I was about to go to college, and I just was like, this can't just be all there is to life. And so I remember thinking that, and I told my dad that, and he's like, oh, I have these life coaches that talk about this kind of stuff, how we're all connected. And I'm like, okay. So he gave me their number. And I talked to them, and they were explaining how we're all made out of the same energy and we're all like one consciousness. And I remember when they were talking to me, I was standing in my backyard and I could just like feel the vibration of the earth. I could feel that like myself connected to everything. And I'm like, okay, this is true. So that was my first initial thing. But then I think later on it was kind of different because I had already had that knowledge a little bit, but it was like it was just deepening that knowledge and learning about how your actual beliefs come into play, and affect other people and situations around you.
Yeah, but so you are already receptive to it, you know, feel allowing yourself to like feel the vibration and feel the things. I feel like that's something a lot of people have resistance without even realizing it. You don't even allow yourself to feel like the sensation in your body when you feel that something is true, or what is your intuition, what is anxiety, what is overthinking. And if you don't do the work of at first reconnecting, at least that's how I see it, right? If you don't do the work of at least feeling the sensations in your body, you won't even know when something feels true or when something feels like off, right? It
I
starts
agree.
with,
Yeah, and I think everyone's different too because I know what you mean. Like Mike, for example, he's also into the same thing, but he was different because he's more like logic minded, I guess, and he
mm,
didn't buy into it right away. He said he always thought this stuff was crazy, but he actually said, I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza, and learning about it from a scientific standpoint, that actually helped him with buy-in. But for me, I didn't resonate with that. I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, I guess that backs it up, but I went more off of the feeling. So I think it depends on the person too.
interesting. Yeah, that's true. It's either you can go from the logical side, which the Dr. Joe Dispenza books are like, I think they're a must read. They're fantastic. For me, I guess that I am a little bit like him. I'm very logical, and I need to see like what is the science, and you need to talk to me about like science and machines and whatever and testing, which it's my way to feel reassurance, right? It's just instead of feelings, but actually now I lean more on the feeling because I feel like my logical mind is like, okay, enough now. You don't need to understand to see everything. You can also trust your feelings. And I feel like there's like two ways to get there. Just for the people who are not following you on TikTok, who is Mike? I
Oh,
know
Mike
who's
is
Mike,
my
but you know, yeah,
boyfriend. Yes, he
yeah.
is my boyfriend who is also my specific person that I manifested. And I think, the story I tell on TikTok, just basically about how I manifested him, I think is mainly how people found me and followed me was from that.
Yeah, because it's not often that you hear. I think you were one of the first that I heard talk about SP. And I had to Google it. I was like, what does SP mean? Manifest your SP. SP. What can that possibly mean? So I had to like jump out of the app and go like, what is SP? And so can you give a definition of what is
Right.
SP?
Yeah, so an SP is specific person. It's basically anyone in your reality that you already know. So I think a lot of times people think that it's just romantic, and it really is like any relationship. Like I've changed other
Oh,
relationships with like my kids or like family members or even like friends too. And it just comes down to because Neville Goddard uses the term everyone is you pushed out, which just means because we're all one consciousness and we're all one energy, basically it's just saying everyone is reflecting you back to you because they're just another aspect of you. And that's why you can transform the relationships. But it is really interesting. I think most people want it romantically, like I said, but it does apply to like any person that you know in your reality.
yeah, you said that often, and I wanted you to expand on that. The thing about you are your no, your 3D is you pushed out. No, I'm not saying that right. Something like that. Can you
Right?
please say it correctly, better than
No,
me?
you're right.
Explain what that.
Yeah, everyone is you pushed out.
There we go.
Yeah, it's basically saying your 3D. I used to say it is a reflection of you. A lot of people say your 3D reality, which is the reality you live in, and your world and earth and everyone in it is a mirror of you, and so it'll reflect back your stories and your assumptions. I always say it's a projection of me, and I like that better because I can kind of feel how that's true, and I'll do my best to explain it without in words. But like basically, it's because like I was saying, we're all one consciousness. It's like other people are just aspects of you or projections of you. And so the way that I view it is kind of like your subconscious mind is like a film projector, and then the film that you put in the subconscious mind they're your beliefs and assumptions and stories about yourself, about the world around you. And then your 3D reality, which is, yeah, like I said, the reality you live in, is basically a big movie screen, and all of those beliefs and assumptions are just playing out with different characters and different scenes and different situations and circumstances that have to prove that film true and have to like show you those stories. And it's crazy because once you, at first it sounds kind of far-fetched and you're like, that doesn't make sense because I didn't think this specific detail, like I don't understand. But it's funny because the more you practice it and the more you look at it, you notice how the little details and circumstances or things people do or say to you are proving more general beliefs and assumptions you have true. And it's funny that every time something happens, even now to this day, even though I'm very good at it now, I'll still be like, I didn't think that, like what? And then I'll be like, oh no, I do. I have an assumption. And it's like you always catch it. It's funny.
Yeah, and the thing is, when to be honest, it took me a while to get into manifestation because of my very logical, mathematical mind, etc., etc., right? But
Hmm.
you realize that even when you don't think you are manifesting, you are, because
Yes.
people, I remember when I was pretty negative about it, like when you think your world is shit, your world will be shit. And it's not because it's not going well that you're not manifesting well. Does that mean that it's like even if you don't believe that manifestation is real, if you think that your world is shit and that your life is whatever, whatever, it is a projection of what's in your mind, right? And that's a moment. That's what clicked for me because I was like, oh, even maybe I'm not manifesting the life of my dream, and maybe I don't by not believing in that. It's because I believe that I'm not worthy of it, or that I can do it, or that I'm incapable of reaching all the things that I want to achieve, right? And that is the reality that I'm living.
Hmm.
And that's the projector. I think it's a great metaphor because that's when it clicked for me. I was like, I'm already manifesting my life by not being happy, by being miserable, by being sad, etc. I'm actually manifesting that because I have low self-esteem, because I have a
Yes.
low self-concept, etc., etc. So even when you don't think you're manifesting, you are.
I know.
It's
Yes, that's like the irony of it too. It's like even if you say it doesn't work, it still works by showing you it not
that is
working. Like it's just so crazy. It's just like ironic, but I've noticed that it's once you learn it, you can't really forget it now because now everything that happens, it's always in the back of your head where you're like,
yes.
okay, I somehow manifested that, or like I can somehow change it. But I can see how Mike had the same thing where he was just like, oh, I don't really buy into this. I don't really believe this. And then he also, I think, as time went on, he got more into like feeling it as true,
Mm.
also, like you were saying too. And so, like, I think that what you said is it's true and it's powerful. I remember when I learned about all this and I thought about like past relationships and like past any situation, I
Yes,
was like, I totally, I had thought I was just
absolutely.
like a victim this whole time, and I can see how I created everything. And it's just funny how I don't know, it just all makes sense once that you get it and it
Yeah, I
clicks.
think slowly but surely, as you live, you realize, okay, it's all connected, right? But how did you start? Because did you like went all in right away with the weight loss and the specific person, or did you try? Like, how did you like in practice? How did that start in your life?
Let me think. It's funny because it's a few years ago, so like the details are a little bit fuzzy, but
Yeah.
basically, I remember what happened was weight loss was way easier for me to do than specific person, and I think it's
Hmm.
because specific person manifestation seemed far-fetched to me. And we're just taught that other
Yeah.
people have nothing to do with you, and that's not a thing, and
Yeah.
like just stay in your own lane. But like I think I had a harder time grasping that. So weight loss was easier for me. I remember thinking, okay, my body is a delayed 3D reflection of me, just like everything else in my
Hmm.
reality. So I was like, what beliefs do I have? I realized I had a belief about not wanting to be seen because at the time, I just it kept manifesting in different physical ways of me hiding. So, for example, like I was embarrassed of my body and how bloated I would get, so I would just hide in big baggy clothes. And then I would manifest eczema, which made me always want to cover my hands. I manifested acne, like I said, which always made me want to cover my skin. And then I would always talk super quietly. There's the way I talk on TikTok. I would never. Oh my gosh, I would be terrified to
Oh,
like do
wow.
that at the time.
Because it
Never.
sounds so natural when you do it. Like it's like I told,
Yeah.
like it's just it sounds so you actually.
Oh, thank you. And that's true. It's because I did create like a whole new, I guess, I don't want to say character, but I did create like a whole new version of myself and I really became that version. But yeah, at the time I was like, oh, I don't want to be seen. And so I was like, okay, well, who's the version of me who wants to be seen? Like, what would I be doing? And I was like, I wouldn't be hiding all the time. I'd be like dressing in a way that I felt good about. And
Mm.
I started applying it like that, I think, with self concept work. So, like, how I actually viewed myself and what I believed about myself. So, I applied it with weight loss first. And I remember also learning about self concept and how it really is kind of like a character that you play. Like even your personality is like a role you're playing that you can change at any point. And so I started learning about that, and I applied it to that, and I started acting from like the character that was like the healthiest version of me at the time. And I was like, oh, so like, what would this version of me eat? When would I stop eating? Like, and I really like thought about it like that. So I applied it like that with weight loss very easily. Like I lost weight really quickly. With Mike, I remember most of it was me trying to like learn about it, I think at first, because I'm like, this is weird. Like okay, other people are a reflection of you. And I was like, how does that work? And I think a lot of it was me trying to figure out how it worked first. But I did try different things. I remember trying to do like visualizations where I would picture like a scene going on a date with him or something. I think I tried to do like some affirmations and stuff, and that I wasn't really seeing anything happen with. And I think it's just because that one was, my body was just about me, and then that was like harder for me to grasp. But like over time, it was funny because I kind of saw it play out. The more comfortable I got with it, the more he was like, oh, then I started noticing you more here. Then I started liking you more here. And it perfectly lined up with how comfortable I was with like, and how much trust I had in that. So I think it was funny how it worked out like that. But eventually I got it clearly because it worked out with him. So
At the end of the day, it worked. But it's interesting that you were honest about the fact that you were skeptical, because I feel like some people, when they get into it, maybe they forget the part that they were skeptical about it. And I think sometimes that's why so many people still get resistance, because you hear all of these great things, but people, they're talking from a place of having achieved whatever they want to achieve. But it's like, it's normal to feel a little like skeptical. How did you overcome those like questions and doubt when they were popping up?
So I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but basically I remember it was like, it felt like it was a true, like I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like when I first heard about it, I think it was a Dylan James video that pops up first, and it was said, yes, you can manifest your specific person. And I was like, specific person? I'm like, what's that? So I like watched the video, and the way he described it was very like natural and very like it wasn't like weird and woo-woo and crazy. It was very like, hey, your other people in your reality are just going to mirror what you think about yourself, and whatever beliefs you have about yourself are going to be proven true by people around you. And I'm like, okay, I can work. Like I think it was literally the way that he described it that got me to try kind of trust that it was actually a real thing, because he described it in a very like grounded mindset way. It wasn't like woo-woo crazy. And so I think for that it was interesting because it was weird. I believed that was a possibility because I had seen it work with other things in the past before I even knew specific person manifestation was a thing. I have like 2 weird stories about that I did, and then I was like, okay, so I know that's a thing, but I think I just didn't know enough about it to like apply it to that. So I was like, I don't get exactly how this works, because like I said, I think earlier too, I had questions like, well, I didn't necessarily specifically think this person was going to say this to me. But when I did more research, I would just look it up on YouTube. YouTube is like basically where I learned everything.
The school, yeah, the manifestation school, yeah.
And it is, yeah, YouTube and applying it. So like I remember thinking I would look it up on YouTube and they'd be like, oh, well, they'll prove it true in details, which is kind of where that projector analogy comes in again, because it's like if I have a belief that men don't find me attractive or something, they might say something specific, or they might not want to commit to me or something like that if I have that belief. But it's not necessarily that I thought they were going to say specifically what they said. It's just like they had to prove that general belief of like, I'm not worthy of commitment, or they're not attracted to me, with little details. And so that like different things like that would come up for me where I was like, I don't get this though, like this doesn't make sense. And I would like question it, and I would look it up. I remember even doing this when I was a teenager and I went to youth group and Bible study and stuff, and I would ask the teacher all these questions because like I said, I just wasn't someone to blindly follow anything. So I was like, okay, I just need to do research. So I think that's kind of how I overcame it. I was like, I was open to it for sure, but I was like, I just need to like know more about it. So I watched a bunch of content on it basically, and I did get coaching at the very end, right before he came in. But most everything I learned was on.
And it's interesting. So you went to Bible study. At no point was that Christian faith kind of like, because some people are like, okay, this is no.
Yeah. Because I went when I was a teenager, and I remember with my first spiritual awakening, the reason I stopped being Christian was because I realized I understood and I saw from above how I thought all religions were kind of talking about the same type of energy.
It's all boiling down to like the same
Yes. And so I had already had that in 2012. And then when I actually, and what was funny about that too was I did that, where at the time I was like, oh, that means religion is like wrong or something when I first had that awakening in 2012. And then when I learned about love assumption in 2021, I found Neville Goddard, and he describes the Bible and explains it in a way that like it made me realize the Bible is the most beautiful text ever, and it's actually all about consciousness and manifestation. And I was just like blown away. And so it actually made me like really like the Bible again after that and be like, wow, this is like very powerful. And I saw it in a different way.
Yeah, so you saw it from another angle, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I love about your journey is that you still talk about the fact that it's coming from inside, because you know
Yeah.
you've manifested weight loss, you've manifested your specific person, Mike.
Mhm.
And so what was the inner work that you did and that people can do in order to, you know, to manifest that new reality?
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up because it really is all inner work. Like even Neville Goddard, like I was just saying, he always says there's no one to change but self. And it's true, especially with specific person manifestation, but manifestation in general. I think people think that it's more like manipulation or something, or it's like you going out and like making it happen. And it's not that. It's just changing literally your mindset on it, and then it gets reflected out in other people. So there's a few different ways. I always say to look at your actual beliefs about you, like your self-concept, but also
Yeah.
you have a lot of stories about other people and like just men in general or women in general or money in general and what you believe is possible for you. And that's like mainly the work, is looking at who am I identifying as right now and what do I believe is possible for me. And I always suggest doing one area at a time. So it's like, what do I believe about men or women or relationships? Or what do I believe about money? What do I believe about my body? And kind of saying, okay, like what do I want, and what would I have to believe about myself in order to have this? And really a lot of it is just changing who you're identifying as, like that, like I was saying earlier, how it's kind of like a character. I really did just
Yeah.
come up with a new version of me because I was like, okay, and this ties into science, like you were saying, there are just quantum physics says there's just infinite
Yeah,
realities.
neuroplasticity. You can completely rearrange your brain as often as you want to, and as long as you want to.
Exactly. And I know we were talking about Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about that with the neural pathways in your brain. You're literally just building up a new neural pathway in
Yeah.
your brain. So I remember thinking like, okay, well, who's the version of me who has like healthy relationships? And I was like, okay, well, men. I had a belief that men didn't find me attractive. So I was like, okay, I would have to believe men liked me and valued me as a partner and found me attractive. And I also had to look at my self-concept, where it was like I had to believe I'm somebody who's valuable and lovable and attractive and all of that. And I really thought about, if I had those assumptions and beliefs, how would I be thinking? And I just kind of started thinking from that angle. And when things popped up in my reality, I was like, how does that version think about this? And I would kind of act from that new character until that's just who I am now. And I think that's
Yeah, so
why
you literally, in practice, you literally reinvented yourself. That's what it
I
is
did.
about, right? But like practically every single day, every single hours and minute of your day, you worked onto like reinventing who Kayla is and who you wanted to be in that
Yes, and it
in
happens
life.
like, yeah, exactly. And it like happens over time. Like it definitely wasn't overnight. Like it just took me, over time it was like more stuff would come up. I would work on a different area, but that's all it is. And it's like it's funny because that does become that's why it comes off as authentic, because that's genuinely who I am now. I don't even like identify with the version of me a few years ago who was just struggling all the time. And it's because of the way your brain works, and the only reason your current version of you and your current reality feels so true and real is because that neural pathway is really strong. Like you've just thought that way over and over again. Every time you think that way, oh, my life is shit, like you were saying, it fires and wires the synapses in your brain and strengthens the neural pathway. And so when you go to build a new one, it feels unnatural at first. It feels weird at first because your mind's just not used to thinking that way. And then eventually, the more you do that, the more you're like, no, my life is amazing. Actually, I can have what I want. It fires those neural pathways, and then you think more dominantly as that one builds up, and then eventually the old one actually like dies away. And so it is funny, it's backed up by like your mind and science and all of that too, but that's all it is. It's not as like woo woo, I think, as it sounds.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We think it is so woo-woo, but it is actually very logical. I thought it was very woo-woo until I realized it is very
Yeah.
logical. And if even if you have a belief that you cannot create new neural pathway, that is a neural pathway in itself. You know, it's like this vicious circle, like we talked about this. If you don't believe
Yes.
that you can actually change your entire identity, the universe will be like, I'm going to prove to you that you cannot create a new identity, and I'm going to let you remain the same and show to your and put you in the same situations over and over and over again. So it's really, but I feel like it requires like resilience and courage to be like, I'm going to change myself, I'm going to change my life. And also when it comes to time limit, right, like, because you don't know when it's going to happen. Like, do you recommend people to put a time limit, like, oh, I want that in that amount of time? Like, how do you deal with time? Because I am impatient, and I believe that some of your clients can also be impatient. How do you deal with like time limit?
That's a good question. I don't always recommend it because then if it does, I don't recommend it for people who aren't really, they don't have good confidence with manifestation yet, because then if it doesn't happen by that time frame, because they're like wavering a lot and they're like, what if it doesn't, what if it does, and no, what if it doesn't, and then it doesn't happen for whatever reason by that time, then they kind of get discouraged. And so I don't always recommend it. And also I think it creates anxiety for people sometimes with the time limit, because they're like constantly looking for it. But the best way for somebody who's impatient, because you can manifest on a time crunch, and I've done it, and I'll tell you how to, but I think the best way if you're impatient is to like identify as somebody who just always gets what you want really quickly. Because to me, I started doing that where I'm like, oh, I always get what I want. Everything always works out for me. And it's just like everything happens very quickly, and also building up your trust in manifestation. Because I've noticed the more I've practiced it and the more I just build up my belief that like I know this works, I've seen it happen time and time again. It's like my manifestations are so fast. I've seen things change like on a dime, like in a second, overnight. Like I've seen people completely act completely differently like overnight. It was the weirdest thing. And so for me, I think it's like having that trust is the biggest thing with manifesting quickly and also on a time crunch. Because now I'm good at manifesting on a time crunch because I just know if I say it's happening by this time, it's happening by this time. And so for time crunch manifestation, the best way is to involve your thinking mind as little as possible. And what I mean by that is by basically saying, I'm so glad it happened by this time. Like, let's just say you wanted it by Saturday. You're like, I'm so glad I got that by Saturday. Move on with my day. I'm not going to sit here and affirm it happened by Saturday. It happened by Saturday. I'm just like, yep, it happened by then. And that's where that like confidence and I think trust and manifestation comes into play. Those are the people who are good at manifesting. Whoops, on a time crunch are those the people who like know, like it's more of a
Yeah,
decision.
but I love when you say take out your thinking mind, because that is not where I'm good at. My thinking mind has like a hold on me, and I get derailed by the thinking mind. Can you talk about that a little bit more, like the thinking mind, and how, like, why do you need to disconnect from it, quote unquote? I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
using the right terms, but you know.
Oh, I know what you mean. And I think like this is one, I made a video on this on YouTube, I think yesterday, and it's like so common. I think people get discouraged or upset when they have like human thoughts or human emotions or doubts. But I always say the least resistant way to manifest is understanding. And I've actually gotten way better at manifesting since doing this, is understanding and accepting the fact that you are human. Like you came down, I always say we're consciousness that came down to have a human experience. And we need the thinking mind to have a human experience. So it's not all bad or it's not like horrible or anything. It's more of like honestly training it. And I've noticed that it's kind of like training a dog. Eventually, it's like not that doubts never come up or things never come up for me, but it's like now when it comes up, I recognize, oh, that's my thinking mind doing its job. And I'm able to like, that instantly shifts you to observer mode. So you're observing the mind instead of identifying with it. And then that puts you in a position where you're like, okay, no, that's fine that I thought that way, but like we're actually doing this. And it's just like a redirection. The same way you would kind of do with a dog. Like if a dog is like, I don't know, chewing on your shoe or something, and you're like, hey, nope, we're not doing that. We're actually going to do this over here. Here's your toy. And then eventually they just stop doing it. And it's
It's
kind
a
of the same.
constant retraining. It's like really just like you did for your self concept, which I don't know if we're defining, but we're gonna talk about that later. But it's just it's it's retraining yourself, because I feel like we don't realize how much we've been trained. I
Yeah.
like your entire childhood is about being trained. It's about absorbing all the messaging that is around you, right? And all of that. I'm saying this now. I look very comfortable, but I had to realize all this stuff and to
Yes.
read about it, and to I had to experience it myself and to realize, God, we just are surrounded with a certain type of messaging and we absorb it, and then we think that it's the norm, and we think that it is fate, or that it is our destiny. But you can rewrite like your programming, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a computer, or you can rewrite like the code of your brain, and but first you have to believe that you can that you can do that. It's like, again, the vicious circle, right?
Yes.
um But you can rewrite that programming, but it just requires you to constantly train. And like, what would you say to someone who's like, okay, I've done, I don't know, visualization for a week or two, I don't know, or I've done XYZ exercises. I'm trying to be nice to myself, to change my self-concept. I'm sick and tired because nothing is changing. What would you say to that kind of?
That is like really common, and it's especially when you first start. Like we all just like want everything right now, and so like I could see that happened to me too when I first started, where I was like, oh, this is so slow. Like I don't know what I'm doing. My biggest thing I would start with is a good foundation about manifestation in general, like your belief about manifestation and your ability to do it. Otherwise, it's just like it ends up getting harder and more confusing. And the other thing I think a lot of people get confused on is like it really is more of a, it's not about the effort, it's about the discipline. And I always like to say that because I think people think they have to work
Ooh,
really
interesting. Can you
hard.
repeat that? It's not about the effort, it's about the discipline.
Yes. It's not about how many techniques you do or how long you do it or what, I think that's what we're trained to do, like you were saying. We're taught so many things. It's like I have to work really hard for what I want and I have to like keep doing things to make it happen. And it's not
Yeah.
that, because I manifest so many things by just deciding one time where I'm like that's going to happen, the end, and I'll do it again. And it's not about the effort. It's about like that decision, like I'm deciding I'm somebody who has this or is going to experience this now. And so I think if it's been a long time and you haven't seen anything happen, remind yourself, one, what we've been talking about this whole time, that like it's always working. So if it hasn't happened, I know there's something, because I get people all the time that are like, I've been doing this for years and nothing happened, which tells me just in that statement that we're thinking nothing's happening. So that's why nothing's happening. But also like there's something not in a, I don't want to say wrong, but there's something not in alignment with your thoughts that with what you actually want. So for me, I would say take a step back if you're not seeing results and be like, let me, one, be gentle with myself. What beliefs do I have about manifestation and my ability to do that? And then also it's more of like being that version of you and not just like saying you're that version, especially with self-concept. I see a lot of people say, well, I've been saying I'm loved and I'm confident, but I see no results. And it's like, for me, I felt the same way. I was like, I don't feel more confident after like robotically affirming I'm confident for 6 months. It
Yeah.
wasn't until I literally was like, let me, who is the version of me who's confident? How would I act? And I kind of started just like thinking from that version of myself
Mm.
instead of like, okay, how would the confident version of me walk into this room right now? And things like that. That's when I started like actually seeing results and
Something
seeing.
that changed, that really drastically accelerated like the shift in self-concept was, okay, so not now because it's winter, so calm down. But during summer, I would listen to a podcast about manifestation, and then I would act as if I'm on the phone with, because I would put my earphone. I would act as if I'm on the phone, and I would act as if I'm living my my dream life, or
Mhm.
my desired reality, but as if I was on the phone with like a friend or whatever the case may be, and I would talk, and people would know that I'm talking to myself, and it's okay. Um, but yeah, I would literally act as if I'm on the phone with someone and I'm
Yes.
talking about my dream day or my dream whatever, or my plan. I'm gonna travel. I'm gonna do this. Or I'm gonna talk to this about my colleagues or whatever. And
Mhm.
I feel like the act of doing that, walking and talking, doing my 10,000 steps, walking and talking, it worked for me. But I feel like each person can maybe find their exercise,
Mhm.
what works best for them. But I know that I felt the switch because I was walking and talking out loud, and
Yeah.
it felt better and better, and I felt more and more comfortable doing it.
Yes, and you were building up that neural pathway of what you want. I love doing that too. Like I love any sort of like delulu, as we would say on TikTok, or any sort of like delusional. Used to love doing that so much, and it's because your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're saying and like what you're thinking or what's actually happening around you. And so when you're like, yeah, I'm on my dream life, I'm doing this, like your brain's like, okay, and then it makes you feel like this is
Yeah,
true
and I
now.
was talking about it in the present tense. Like I just booked a flight to that, or I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I was talking.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I looked absolutely insane, and it's only because people did not know that I was talking to myself or that I was listening to a podcast. But I feel like when you find the exercise for you, can you talk about manifestation practice maybe so people
Yes.
can know like what's available there if they want to try it out or if they want to?
Yeah, and I love that you said that because there's different things are going to work for different people. And I think that's where that argument comes in on TikTok where people are like, well, this person said this and this person said this. And this is kind of comes down to the theme we've been talking about the whole time. It's like you're going to get whatever you assume is true. And this also applies
Yeah,
to manifestation techniques.
yeah,
So if you think like you've affirmed something and it doesn't work, but someone else affirmed something and it does work, now they have a belief that affirmations are the way. This person has a belief that that doesn't work for them. And so it's going to be I've noticed it's whatever resonates with you and it's going to change over time. Because now, like I said, just deciding is my favorite technique. And that's just literally making a decision like, hey, I'm going to experience this, the end. And I just don't think about it again. Unless it pops up again, then I'm like, nope, I'm going to experience this. But if you told me that 3 years ago, I remember learning about just deciding and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I have to keep
yeah.
on saying it. And so, like, it's going to resonate differently at different times. So there's different techniques you can do. The one I just said, just deciding, you can do Delulu tech. I always call that what you were saying. I call that the natural thought game. And I don't think I came up with this. I'm not trying to take credit, but I always just call it that because it's kind of like planning out your day and talking about past things and making up like fake memories and also future plans
Mm.
from the reality you want. And I used to do this in the shower, exactly what you were saying. When you're like, oh, I probably sounded crazy. I'm like, no, I used to do that too. Where I'd be in the shower and I was manifesting Mike and having a following at the same time because I wanted to talk about manifestation. And I remember I would get in the shower and I would just be like, for this, whatever, 5 minutes or whatever, I'm just going to like I'm gonna think like I would if I already had that stuff now. So I remember thinking like,
Mm.
oh, I'm gonna go to the store later because Mike's coming over for dinner. But like first I have to film this video because everyone's waiting to hear from me. I had no follower. I think I had one follower as my sister. And I hadn't posted anything yet and I wasn't even talking to Mike. And so I remember 6 months later though, I did get in the shower. My thoughts were naturally autopiloting. And I naturally was like, oh yeah, Mike's coming over for dinner and I have to film this video because I haven't filmed one. And I did have a following and I was dating Mike. And I was like, wow, that's so weird because I did that on purpose
Wow.
6 months ago. So you can do that. You can do affirmations are a big one, which is just, people like robotically affirming where they're like, oh, I'm so confident, I'm confident, I'm confident, which is over and over again. Or just having a list of affirmations like, I'm so wealthy, I make millions of dollars. That's a big one people like. When I really got results, I think was when I would make a decision I was going to experience something and kind of just act as if I would if I had it, but
Mm.
also using affirmations to redirect. I needed at the time. There's visualization, which is just where you kind of pick a scene that would imply you had what you wanted. So like if you're going on a date with your person and they're like, oh, I love you so much, like I love being in this relationship with you, just hearing them say that, putting yourself there, that's a good one. There's so many techniques too. There's like all these TikTok techniques, like the whisper method, where you just imagine like saying something in someone's ear when they're sleeping. Like there's so many, but those are the main ones is like affirmation, visualization, scripting, where you write out what you want like it already happened. That's a good one too. So there's so many, but it honestly depends. Like, just don't get discouraged, is what I would say to people if something somebody said works for them didn't work for you, because that might not be for
Mm.
you right now.
Don't get discouraged and don't get overwhelmed. I feel like it's sometimes people want to do so much because you see this and you see this and you see that. As someone who went through this and I
Mhm.
tried like all the techniques, at some point, if you try and try and try, you'll figure out what works best for you. For
Yeah.
me, it's this the thinking stuff and the scripting. I love writing because I've always been into writing, and I love writing about my desired reality as if it's happening in the moment. It feels, I don't know, you need to feel it. You need to feel as if you are living it in the moment. I guess if it's affirmations for you, if it's visualization, I love visualization because I have a very vivid mind. And I'm always thinking, so might as well thinking about my desired reality and use that for something. Um, so I guess find what works for you. Um, but try it out and be open-minded when it comes to like to manifestation. And I love the just deciding. I don't think that I'm there yet because of my thinking mind and because I'm really bad at detaching. I I have really I'm still struggling with completely detaching. So I would ask you, how do you detach? How does one detach? How do you
I
practice?
like that question because I was the same way. Like I tried everything and it's just funny like I know what you're talking about. Like every different things work for different people. Like I remember a lot of people talk about robotic affirming, and I just like don't. I didn't like that. I was like, it's weird. I just feel annoying, like saying something over
And
and
also,
over.
to be honest, sometimes I would forget. Like I would go on my day, I'm like, oh, I didn't do my affirmations, and that's why it never stuck with me because I was like, oh, I forgot. Yes, I am amazing. Yes, I am wealthy. But it feels so. I don't know. For me, it's just maybe it works for some people, but for me, it just feels. I don't know. But
And it
sorry,
does.
how do you detach? Sorry, I didn't want to
Oh
interrupt you.
no, you're right. I was gonna say too, like you're right. Like for some people, like that's like their method. Like they love it, and so it does depend on the person. It's not like someone's right and someone's wrong. It
Yeah.
definitely is about you. And so with detaching, what I realize is that's kind of like living in the end, what Neville Goddard talks about. And I think people misconstrue what that means because people think that living in the end means being full delusional. And I'm just gonna walk around like if you're manifesting marriage, like I'm a wife right now, and I have to 24/7 think that I'm a wife, or I'm like a millionaire right now.
Hmm.
And it's not really that. Living in the end is really like detaching from the version of you. You're not detaching from the desire, but you're detaching from the version of you who does not have that. And you kind of act as if you would if it were a very normal, natural part of your life and you've had it forever. So I always think about it like there's two ways I think about it. One is if that thing I had for 10 years, like I was already married to this person for 10 years, or I already had been a millionaire for 10 years or whatever it is, then it's like that thing would be so normal and natural to you that you really wouldn't think about it much. Like you'd be like, oh, I'm grateful for this, but it's like so normal that you don't really think. And it's kind of like the way that
Mm.
you think about a friend or a family member that you're really close to. They're very normal for you to have and you love them, but like they're there. Like you're not trying to get them or anything. And the other way you can do it is thinking if your desire was guaranteed to come tomorrow by 12 p.m., you would be like, oh, I feel relieved. I have nothing else to do,
You
nothing
wouldn't
else
even
to
think
worry
about
about.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what detachment feels like. It's kind of just like this decision that you know it's going to happen. And when I used to be like that too, where there's no way I could have done just deciding. I recently started doing that the last like year, I would say. And it doesn't work on things I have resistance to still. I have to keep redirecting if I have resistance. But for most things, it's because I have the biggest thing with just deciding is because I have the trust in manifestation. And that really
Yeah.
helps with detaching. Like when you know it works for you and you have good trust that the law of assumption works and you're good at it, that's when you're able to detach, I think, a little bit easier because you're like, oh, I know I'm going to get this, so I don't have to think about it. And also making sure you feel good internally and like you day to day you just like feel, I guess, grounded, happy, stable, and fulfilled in general because then you're not like needing that thing to come in to like feel
Mm.
a certain way. You're
Yeah,
just like, oh,
again, we're going back to the internal shift. You start with you, you start with self-esteem, self-concept, self-love.
mhm.
And also something that I realized in my own journey is that whether you want it or not, whether you are aware of it or not, you have manifested something in your life at some point because of your thoughts. You just need to think, sit down with yourself, and I am sure that you've manifested something without even realizing it. For me, it was my driving license in 3 months. And it took, because when I was in, okay, so I think we call it high school because it's different. I'm in Europe, but
Yeah.
around when you are 14, 15 years old. I don't know how you call it, but at that time, right? I had friends, they were always like a grade over me. And it was that time where everyone, so he was around 17 maybe, and they were all bigger than me. And it was the time where people were having their driving license. And, so we would talk about that. Not me, I was way too small. And, I was not interested in that. I was very much a passenger princess. And so they would share, oh, that went well, that went bad, or, just stories about driving lessons, right?
Hmm.
And one of them said that he had his driving license in 3 months. As soon
Wow.
as he said that, something, I was like, I'm going to get it also in 3 months. When I will get it, I will have it in 3 months. And I was maybe 16. He was 18, 19. I don't remember. But the thing is, he was driving cars for years before that. He was driving like his father's truck or whatever. Like he knew how to operate a car, right? So obviously for him, it was very easy to do that. But everyone was sharing their experience. You had the one who's been like 3, 4 times at the exam, and the one who's like in 3 months he has it. But I remember I was like, I can do it. If he can have it in 3 months, I'm gonna have my driving license in 3 months. And I was not even thinking. I didn't even know what manifestation was, self concept. I was 16. I knew nothing about that. Right. Fast forward to a decade later, On the dot, I had my driving license in 3 months. And let me tell you, the first time that I sat behind the wheel was the first time that I have my driving, not the test, but my driving lesson. I did not know anything. Don't ask me which pedal was doing what. Don't ask me how that works. I did not even know how to do that. There was no way for me to have it. And the way we have it in France, well, in Europe, you have the theory part and you have an exam and then you have the practice and you need to do a certain amount of hour and the driving instructor gives you, I don't know, 60, 50 hours, whatever. And so it's like a two-parter. You have the theory where you go every day and you study and then you have to answer 40 questions correctly, whatever. I had that in a month. And then I started my driving lessons, and so the first class was the first course was hilarious because truly I had no idea what I was doing, no idea what I was doing. And he gave me an amount of hour. He said, "Okay, I think that you're gonna need this, etc., etc." And as the weeks were going by, the lady at the driving school, she said, "Okay, there's an exam on September 30th or something." But she said it like it was an announcement. And I said, "Okay, that's that day. I'm getting my driving license. Yes. I like sign me up. I'm there. I will have my driving license." And it was at the beginning of August, I think. And so I kept driving. I kept going. I kept going. I kept going. And then I remember, I think a week before, my instructor was like, "I'm not sure if you can go on next week." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm not just going." In my head, it was not like I'm going. I'm getting my driver's license. I ended up, having it. I was the only one to get in that group for that driving school. And for me, it is a true testament of manifestation. It's only because years before, for so many years, I had in the back of my head, I'm going to have it in 3 months. Nothing more, nothing less. And it's really not normal. It's not the norm to have it to have it between June and September. And I'm saying all of that. It's a long story, but to tell you that for sure you have manifested something in your life because you had a certain belief, because you had a certain self-concept, because you had a certain thoughts regarding an exam or a job or whatever. You were so sure that you would get something and it happened. And that is manifestation.
Yeah, that was
And,
so
and I feel like go back to that moment and this is the feeling that you had. This is manifestation. This is being sure. This is detachment. I didn't think about my driving license, right? Yeah. And I feel like you need to go back you need to look into your life because for sure you've manifested something at some point.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And it's just so shows how powerful your mind is where the actions will just follow. Like you'll just know what to do because there was no logical way you would have known how to drive it. You were just like, "Oh, I just know what I'm doing." And because you knew that, your body's like, "Okay, we know what we're doing." And it got reflected back even in your action. So that's like, and I love what you said about that because it's true, like you probably have. And I remember thinking that, like, once I learned about it, I was like, I have had weird stuff happen like that I thought was just like a coincidence or something. And then you realize it's like, no, you had that like full belief in it. And that's why you were like, no, even when that's a perfect example because even when people are like, "I don't know if it's going to happen," you're like, no, it's going to happen. And then it did anyway. Like that's exactly what it is that.
I'm telling you it's going to happen. I'm getting my driving license. I said it's going, and it's not even like I said, it's like for me, it was so clear. And again, I was not into manifestation back then. And when I started getting into manifestation and reading all these books, I reflected back to that experience and being like, okay, this is the feeling of knowing. This is the knowing state. This is being detached. Because for 3 months, I was not scared about getting it because it was like, obviously, like I'm here, it's happening. And it was honestly a miracle because I can say now, when I was passing my driving exam, I did not know how to operate a vehicle. Like it was pure subconscious or whatever, the divine intervention. First of all, the driving instructor, she was so rude. She was not nice at all. But whatever. I was in my bowl and I was like, I don't care if you're rude. I will get, today is my day. And it's only when I bought my car, maybe like a few months or a year after driving, that I could say, "Oh, I know how to drive a vehicle." For sure, that day, it was pure like divine intervention, right? But it's all about going to that knowing state, to that you know that you're gonna get it, and yeah, you've manifested something in your life, and it's simply you need to go back into your life and figure out, like, but it happened for sure. It happened.
Yeah.
It happened for sure. And I had another question when it comes to, because you have clients, so
Mhm.
you're helping people for love coaching. Do you see a pattern in your clients? Is there's like, when it comes to the way what they want or what they think, what are they, the obstacles that they have? What do you see that is common? Because I feel like it's common for a lot of people, not just your clients, you know?
Yeah, and I think that honestly, I've noticed it's just common across the board. Like anytime somebody tells me like, "Oh, this is gonna sound so bad, but I struggle with this," I'm like, "It doesn't sound bad at all." Like I struggle with that. It's just
Mm.
all of it. One is like very normal, and I think the biggest thing I see is that people are like, "I know you said circumstances don't matter," which basically means like what's around you, what's happening doesn't matter as long as you're like, no, this is what's happening, that's gonna happen. And the same way you did with
Mm.
the license when they were like, oh, what else can happen? Or like, oh, like I've never operated a vehicle. Like all these things were circumstances were in your reality, like the opposite. And you were like, no, this is what's happening. People think, I know circumstances don't matter, but like mine is different. I know this is like, but like this doesn't apply to this specific situation. It's like, no, it does. Like a lot of people think that their situation is different. And the other thing I see a lot is people don't have trust in their ability to actually manifest things a lot of times, where their just belief in manifestation in general is just like, oh, I don't think I can do it. And they'll tell me all the time like, oh, you're so good at it, like I can't be like that. I'm like, no, you absolutely can't. I was not like this. I wasn't just born like this. Like I literally had to train my way to
Yeah.
it. And anyone can do that. And then it's also the biggest one I think is actually self-concept, like of just having like, I don't feel worthy of having this, like I'm not somebody who things work out for, I'm just not somebody who's worthy of love, because I coach on
Mm.
everything, like business, and I hypnotize people on every aspect, but I think, yeah, mainly like relationships is what people come to me for, and that's the biggest one, is like I'm not worthy of love, like I'm just always left or something like that, is mainly it's like comes down to a self-concept thing and not seeing how your stories are reflected in other people, because I think that's the biggest thing with specific person, is like we have specific stories about them too, and like how they show up and like who this person is, and then they'll do it and you're like, oh, that's just them, that's how they always are, and like you think like that, but it can be changed, and I've done this with people and it's like wild when it happens. I've recreated a few people and it's just like every time I'm like, this is so funny, like this person's so different, and so I think that is another thing that comes into play, is having a hard time grasping how actual specific person manifestation works and how the reflection works is another big one I get
And
to.
if someone wants to start on their journey, what would you say would be the very first practical step for them to do? They're like, okay, you know what? You've piqued my interest. I got it. I have something in mind, romantic, someone in mind, romantic or friendship, whatever. You got me. What should I do as soon as I'm done with that episode practically to like start on that journey?
Okay, so I think about this a lot, where if I were to go back in time knowing what I know now to manifest Mike, and I think like what would I do step by step, the first thing I would do is look at who I believe I am. Like what beliefs do I have about myself, and especially again, and I write it down again, like
Mm.
in terms of relationships, like, and you can, if you're not sure, look at past patterns, because I think that's something we all have in common, where we look at patterns we've had in relationships before and we're like, oh, and then you feel this weird thing where you're like, oh, the people are, men are just like this, women are just like this, when really you were the only common factor in like all of those situations.
You have your role to play. Take accountability.
Yep. And so I noticed that, where I was like, oh, men are just this way. Like men just, always cheat on me, was my story I had before. And so like I would look at who I believe I am. Like, do I believe I'm somebody who isn't worthy of what I want? Do I believe I'm someone who's confident? What do I
Mm.
believe in relationships? Like, am I somebody who gets left? Am I someone who is like treated really well, like a queen? Like, how am I treated in relationships? And then I would think about who do I want to be, and like what relationship do I want to experience, and what beliefs would I have to have those things. And I would honestly build that up before even like focusing on the person, because it makes it so much easier when you have good confident beliefs to like believe that that person's going to want you. A lot of
Mm.
people are coming from a self-concept of like, I'm not even worthy of love, men don't even like me, but I'm going to try to convince my brain really hardly that like that one person though that I really like likes me back. And it's so much harder to do. If you already have that good foundation, it's so much easier to just be like, oh yeah, of course they would want me, like, because I'm amazing. And so it's easier to believe. The other thing I would do too after that, Next, I would look at who do I think that person is? Like, what traits do I think they have? How do
The
I think
specific person, you mean?
yes, the specific person. Who are they? Like, well, who do I think, how do I think they react in situations? And then who do I want them to be? Because if you start viewing them differently and expecting them to show up differently, they do. It's very interesting. Or at least in my experience, I've noticed that. It's very interesting.
So it's very much an internal, like an internal shift. We're always going back to the same thing, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
It starts within yourself. And yeah, I'd say write it down. Like really write it down and be honest with yourself. Take your time. Put down the phone. It's something that was very hard for me to do because I realized, God damn, do I have limiting beliefs about myself? Like it's hard to
Yeah.
be like
It is.
to see yourself on the page and see all the crazy stuff that you believe about yourself because most of the time it's a lot of self-hatred, right? Unfortunately, it's not. We love other people, but it's so hard to love ourselves, and it's so hard to be like, damn, I thought all of that about me, that you're not worthy, that you're not enough, that you're too much, that you are, I don't know, you don't deserve this, that you need to change, that whatever, that everyone is so much better than you, or everyone is so much better without you. It's so hard to write it on the page. But it does, I don't know, something clicks. When you do it, you realize, ooh, I'm not all those things actually. It's just beliefs, and it is the foundation not just for a specific person, but also to manifest your dream life, to manifest a job, to manifest. I guess to just live a better life, right? I think
Yeah.
that it's also an advice that like to just live a better life, no matter what it is. It's great to sit down and be like, who do I think I am, and who
Yes.
do I want to be? Like who?
And something so important that you said was being honest with yourself because
Mm,
like you said, it is hard to do. Like you're like, no, I don't do that. Like it's your ego mind trying to be like, no, like I'm right, and like I don't, and I do that happens to everybody. And so like it's funny because then you're right. Once you are honest with yourself, and I'm like, I do have this story of myself. Like I do think I'm bad at
yeah.
this, or I'm not as great as it. Then it instantly you just feel better because you're like, oh, okay, so all this wasn't happening to me. It was just a story I had. And it also puts you in a good position because you're like, oh, it's just a story. It can be changed. So like then it
Yeah.
also puts you in like a position of power when you're honest with yourself. And so I love how you said that. It's very true.
And it's just it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey of also of self-discovery. Like I discovered so much about myself on the journey when I was doing all this work, right? Because and even you looking at your story, your own journey is very empowering and inspiring because of all the work that you've done. And I've learned so many lessons about myself, about the world, about other people, right? And I was wondering, in your own journey, what was the most enlightening or important lesson that you've discovered about yourself, right? Not just about the world, but about yourself and like the nature of like manifestation and all of that
I
on the
think
journey.
the biggest thing was definitely how literal your assumptions will play out and how very literally it's reflected
Crazy.
back. It's like it was, I
Crazy.
remember when it clicked for me. And like I knew, like I got manifestation, and then when I got into specific person manifestation, I had done all these different techniques to manifest Mike and stuff. And it was so crazy to me. I remember it was like it all clicked for me at the very end, and it was like my favorite epiphany I had ever had about manifestation, where I remember thinking like, um, I was like, oh, I don't know why this isn't working because I did a technique, but he's not here. And so I got
Mm.
coaching, and she was like, well, it's because you're saying he's not here. And I was like, whoa. Like, I thought it was just like the technique, and I was just doing random techniques to like just experience the relationship in general. And then I was like, okay, so my very literal story of, okay, I think he likes me and the techniques are working, but he's not dating me is very literally being reflected back. And I instantly realized like I was the one
Ooh.
keeping him right here the whole time. And so I was like, that means if I change it to he likes me and he's also here now, he has to come in. And I did that. I was like, I'm just gonna try this for a week. Like we're dating, it's done. He also likes me, whatever. And he instantly started texting me. And then he instantly had this conversation where he's like, I can never stop thinking about you, blah blah. And I was like, this is insane. And I remember the other one that really made it all click, that how literal it was and how people will mirror it, was like I was self-conscious about the fact that I had kids because I was very young when I had my kids, and I was like, I don't know, like we're just taught in our society that like you're less valuable if you're like a single parent or something. And I was like, I don't know if he's gonna want to date somebody who has kids. And I would go back and forth in my head all the time with the wavering with that when I was manifesting him, where I'd be like, no, he's okay with it. No, maybe he's not. Maybe he is. And then one day I just decided, I was like, I'm done. Like He loves that I have kids. I don't have to know how, but I'm just gonna say he loves it. And I remember on our first date, I asked him, and this is like the one epiphany I'll never forget, and made me realize how literal it was. Um, I was like, how do you feel? And I was like, just be honest. How do you feel about the fact that I have kids? And he's like, well, it was crazy because I just went back and forth in my head about this a lot. And I was like, oh my God. So he was mirroring my thought. And then he's like, then one day I just decided I actually love that you have kids because it shows how strong and resilient you are. And I'm like, God, she's so like amazing that she was able to do this on her own. And I was like, and in my head, I had to just, it was our first day. So I had to be like, oh yeah, oh my God, that's so sweet. But in my head, I was like, holy crap. And it made it
Oh
all.
my God, like freaking out inside while
Yeah, I
trying
was
to
like,
look, yeah.
whoa. Like he was like mirroring my going back and forth and my wavering, and then when I decided, he decided. And I was like, that's the biggest, I think, a thing I had that made it all click was like everything is very literally gonna be reflected back like
And you
that. It's
are
kind of
so
crazy.
powerful. Like, you realize how powerful your mindset
Yeah.
is, and you realize that you've been manifesting your life your entire life. And if you think that you are not worthy, that you are incapable, that you are less than, that you are ugly, not attractive, well, guess why you are at a shitty job single. It's because it's starting with your brain, and I feel well with your mindset. And this is one of the lessons for me, is like how powerful this little thing called brain and thoughts are, and how strong the
Mhm.
programming is, and how deeply rooted sometimes self-hatred or low self-esteem, particularly in women, right? and
Yeah.
and and anxiety and all of that is rooted, and that is shaping your life, right? It's put me in the face of how resistant I can be to, not to change, but like to a new self concept. Like, it was so hard for me to change my self concept,
Me
because
too.
it requires like constant repetition, and I was very much, I want the result right now. I'm not a patient
Mhm.
person, but it was, teaching me detach, 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 and but I feel like it's a journey in self, I don't know, like self discovery and self love, and you discover so much about yourself, your past, your parents, and but like you said, just decide. If you decide that your life can be better,
It
um,
can, yeah. And
it
that's my
can.
favorite part about manifestation is like what you said about how it's really not about the desires. Like it's never about the specific person. It's like it really is you. Like you're just diving into like what beliefs do I have? And so every like desire you have to me is like another catalyst for you to like level up, so to speak, and like clear out more stuff. And
Mm.
I know what you mean. Self-concept was really hard for me. Like I always had hated myself my whole life, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I suck, like nothing works out for me, like I had such a bad self-concept. And so that one was really hard for me to start to be like, okay, what if things did work out for me, like how would I, like it was very, that neural pathway was really strong and like self-hatred, so it was
And how
hard to
did it
like.
feel when it started working out, though? When Mike came into your life, when you were like, how did that, like, that must have felt so like liberating and magical.
Oh my gosh, I remember when he came in and I was like, and we had this conversation where he had said like, and like I said at the time, I didn't really know how literal it was going to be reflected back. Like I thought I was just saying things like affirmations to bring him in and experience the relationship. But he said
Mm.
every affirmation back to me, and I was like, oh my God, like, and it just made me feel like, yes, I was so happy that I was experiencing that, and I was like, yes, I finally got my manifestation because I adore him, obviously. But like, I was
Yeah.
just like, oh my God, like I am literally doing this with everything, and it just made me have this like
Mm.
crazy like God state moment where I was like, I can do this with anything. Like it was just so powerful and crazy, and I think like it just helped me come back to myself. Like that's why I love specific person manifestation so much, because
Mm.
it really was the catalyst for me that like taught me about like law of assumption, but also just like subconscious beliefs and how to work on yourself and how you're being reflected back in everybody. Like I loved it I fell in love with it right then. I was like, I can't wait to tell everyone about this and
Can't
like
wait to
teach
share the
everyone.
message and for everyone to do the same. Because when you experience it, you have to like share it, right? You have to share the message, and spread the good word. And in your relationship with Mike, now that that you are in a relationship with him, and it's going great, what do you think is your biggest strength in the relationship, now that you are on the other side, you have it?
Ooh, I think the biggest thing that we both talk about all the time is like this is our first relationship where both people are awake and understand their reflection. That's like the biggest strength I have is like understanding their reflection, because I think a lot of times in past relationships, if something came up, it's like, this is your fault. You did this to me. And it's like keeps you in victim mindset and you just keep on replaying patterns. But like with us, we both talk about how we've grown like insanely. Like all both of our families talk about how different we are now and how much we've grown since dating, and how much better we've become because of that reflection. So like it's not that stuff never pops up that like annoys us about each other or anything like that. It's like very rare now, honestly. But like when it does, it's more of like even if you have that initial like annoyance or something, you pull back and you're like, oh, this is just me. Okay, what belief do I have? What story do I have? And you
Mm.
shift it. And because we both do that all the time, it's just like we kept leveling up and just getting better and better. I think that's the biggest thing. So then it's like having that safe space where you both understand it and you can both kind of clear it together and have that person who's like supporting you through it. And it's not just you keeping old stories alive and patterns alive and like looping them with each other. It's like how we're actually like growing and letting go of stuff together.
Yeah, it's like being on the same wavelength, and you guys understand like what is going on, and like the story that you're telling yourself, and you see it. I guess that you also see when he's telling himself a story, and he sees when you're telling yourself a story, and like when
Yes.
you're too much involved in like the reality, and when you're, and I guess that that mix, it's like the perfect mix to like grow together and build a healthy relationship. But well, that is inspiring. That gives me a lot of hope, for my own on my own manifestation journey. I feel like it's great to also hear people who've done it, just like, and who are talking about it like normally. I don't know how to explain it, in day to day life. So thank you so much for sharing your story with me, with us on TikTok, but also on the podcast. It helps
Mhm.
me greatly on my own journey to regain, not regain faith, but sometimes you need a,
Yeah.
I don't know, another push of motivation to be like, okay, no, it's possible. When you see other people doing it, you're like, okay, you can do it. You can do it too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, everything that you've manifested is absolutely fantastic. Your knowledge is absolutely fantastic. Your energy, like I said before we started recording, it's really like one of my favorite things. I think you are the, if there's a content creator about manifestation that I listened from start to finish, every single video that pops up, it's you. And
Thank
you
you
know
so
about attention span, like it's trash. Like I'm really, and I'm doing my best to like absorb it. Um, but yeah, and also because I think at some point you need to, when you are doing it, you also need to not listen to too many people. Does that make sense? At
I
some
agree.
point, when you are in the thick of it, like
I
stop
agree.
consuming.
Yeah, because I watched a lot of content too, and I know what you mean. I would get stuck. And one, I agree. Like, I think it's important to share the success stories because I used to watch a bunch of them. But like, my biggest thing with my content was I was like, I talked to Mike before. I really wanted to. I talked about weight loss, but I really want to talk about a specific person. But I didn't want to like embarrass him or make him feel because it is kind of like taboo or like weird to talk about. But I was like, I really wish that I had somebody who was really authentic with like what it actually looked like and what they struggle with. Would you be okay with me like sharing what I did? And he was like, share whatever you want, like absolutely. If you think it's gonna help people, help people. And I was like, okay. And so I did. And so
Just do
like
it. Mm.
I think yeah, I think that like helps too. It's like it's just very everyone, like I said, like we were talking about earlier, everyone kind of has their own opinion on it and you're going to experience whatever you assume. So I think like finding somebody who resonates with you is always, I had a few, like I think I had two or three people that I really liked that I trusted and they also had shared their journeys and I'm like, okay, so like that's who I want to that's who I'll follow, that's who I'll listen to because it can get confusing like you said. Um with it, but yeah, that's like, and also I agree, it's like it's at some point it's like not watching content, it's actually applying it too. um
Exactly. Stop. Don't be overwhelmed by it.
yeah.
Get as much knowledge as you can. I'd say read books also. TikTok is cool, but people are also doing it for the clicks, and sometimes it can be so,
Yeah.
I don't know, like sensationalist and whatever, and it can make you feel bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Take a few books: Dr. Joe Dispenza, others, Neville Goddard, Joseph Smith,
Mhm.
and yeah, apply it instead. At some point, stop listening to people and just start apply it and do the
Yes.
work of,
And
and
practice
commit to a technique. Yeah.
Yeah, practice, like honestly, practicing is the thing that though that's the reason I'm so good at manifesting now is because I've just applied it over and over again and I've seen the reflection over and over again and like that is the beauty of having someone else in a relationship that's also
Mm.
awake because well like you were saying we'll catch each other if one of us is like oh this is happening and I don't know but like oh remember like what is it showing you and we're like oh you're right like we constantly are pulling each other out of like the 3D because it's very easy to get sucked in
Oh,
and
but
so
before I
like
let you go, I had a question.
yeah,
What would you say to people who think that they're doing it wrong? Can you do it
I would
wrong? And how do you know that you're doing it right? Whatever,
I
you
would
know?
say Mike always says this to me, and he says the only thing you're doing wrong is thinking that you're doing something wrong, which is true. So if you're like, "Oh, I'm doing it wrong," and then it's like you're doing it wrong. My biggest
Mm,
thing is noticing that if you're not getting movement or you feel really bad, then something has to shift. And I don't like to label it as like wrong because at the end of the day, I could say I thought the opposite for 6 months and that made it happen even faster. And because I made that decision, it will happen that way. But it's more of like I always go off of how you feel. Like as long as you're feeling good, you're not super anxious, you're not upset all the time, like that needs to be addressed first because I always say you're the most important person in your reality. So,
yeah.
but then I would also say like if I'm not seeing it, being really honest with yourself, like what am I actually thinking? What am I actually assuming? Not the techniques throughout the day. Are you constantly assuming this isn't happening? Or are you assuming it? Because like that happened to me where I did techniques and I did them really well and I visualized perfectly, but I was like, but he's not here. And so like he was like, okay, I'm not
Yeah, it's
here.
like for the 5 minutes that you are visualizing, everything goes well, but then as soon as you open your eyes, like, oh shit, he's not here. So it's like it's erasing, I guess,
Yeah,
all the work that you've just done. And I guess also the techniques should not make you more anxious,
yeah, I agree.
more fearful, more.
Yeah, no, if you feel more fearful, I always say that like if techniques are making you anxious, it's like let's pull back and like think about what else we can do. Because
Mm,
like I said, like and I always say you don't technically have to like feel great to manifest. Like I've been super anxious sometimes and I'm like, oh, that made it happen even faster and it will happen like that. But
mm,
like just because you don't have to doesn't mean that's not important. And I always say like
mm.
your feeling state should be the most important. If somebody's really anxious and they're upset, I'm always like, let's drop that for just a little bit and then reground. And it's going to be one, the main thing is you're going to feel way better, but two, like you're going to be able to manifest that thing so much more easily from a
Faster.
good feeling state.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is absolutely inspiring. What I would say to people, read a book about it. Don't get overwhelmed with it on TikTok. Just follow Coach Kayla. Everything will be fine. That's all you need. Don't follow like a thousand people talk about manifestation. It's okay to swipe up, even if they tell you not to swipe, not to stop scrolling. It's okay to scroll. There's this book that really changed everything for me, and I listened to it when I was driving to Austria. It's Joseph Smith, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, or something. It is
Okay.
available on YouTube. It's available on YouTube, and I listened to it because I think it's 7 or 8 hours, and it took me 8 hours to drive, and it is life changing. And it's also great to hear it from people from the past, because back when there was no internet and etc., to see how it was working, and to see that it's only when you are sustaining a practice over time that it will work. Read a few books about it. That's, I guess, to see it on the paper, and to see it maybe from a more logical mind if you're more like me, or from more like a feeling perspective. Don't get overwhelmed. Be gentle with yourself, I guess. If you have anything to add to say to like a newbie, I'd say who's interested, but
I think you were spot on with that. Like honestly, it's like for me, knowledge was everything. Like doing research on it was everything because
mm,
like, it does sound weird. And like even though I had that feeling like, okay, this sounds like it could be true, I didn't
mm,
blindly follow it. Like
yeah,
watching videos, reading books. And I like that you said people from the past, like Neville Goddard's one of my favorites.
yeah.
Um, love him. And I love like even like you'll see how this is not some new woo-woo TikTok thing.
That's the
Like
thing.
yeah, it's like Florence Scovelchin, she's from like the 1800s and she's talking about this, like the stuff from The Secret, which is, I know more law of attraction, but that's like, I mean, that the information from that came from like ancient Egypt. So it's like a lot of it's like very old
It's not
stuff.
new. It's not TikTok. It's not just trendy. And it was my mistake. I was like, okay, you guys are cute talking about manifestation. But then I read books and I was like, oh, actually, they're talking about something that's very ancient, right? It's not new. It is rooted in history. And yeah, so thank you so much for accepting to sitting down again. I cannot be more elated. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I feel so much better about my journey. I had a little down today, but now I feel good. I feel better. I'm back on track. Everything's fine.
Good.
Everything will be fine, and I am worthy. And I am wealthy, etc., etc. Working on my self concept every single day. And yeah, thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing. It is very inspiring. And I know that you're helping like people all around the world of every age. And Yes. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so much.
for
Thank you for
joining
having
me.
me. I love talking to you. And like, you just have such this beautiful energy. I'm like, oh, I just enjoyed it so much. So thank you so much for having me
Thank
on.
you. This is why the podcast here, this is why the podcast is here. And now I'm manifesting having a successful podcast. So I'm saying it now. The
I'm
podcast will be
manifesting it with
successful.
you.
I just decided this podcast will be successful. Just decided.
I'll decide it with you because you are just like so great at interviewing and you're just like such a good conversationalist and you're just like very well spoken and have great energy. So I would love to see you blow
Thank you.
up on here and have like an amazing, successful podcast too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot. I'm gonna cry after I hit leave. Thank you so much. Have a great, great day while I have a great evening on my side of the globe.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you. Have a great night.